Hi everyone, this is Suzanne Wagner, and I thought today I would just do a video sort of combining the number three, which is about positive mind in the yogic system that I use. It has a tendency to be very positive and very upbeat and very happy-go-lucky and good-natured and sarcastic, witty, and humorous. But at the same time, the number three is also a number that is about the duality between positivity and negativity, which I think in our world at this moment, we're seeing that duality. The number three is about devil and divine, which means when something's on, it's absolutely divine. When something's off, it's really, really off. And within all of us, we are on this planet to do duality. We came down to earth to do duality. Half of the day is light and half of the day is dark. Half of us is light and half of us is dark. Part of our brain is a higher functioning mind, and part of our brain is a reptilian, animalistic, reactive, survival of the fittest brain. Being on earth, I believe, is to find that balance between our angelic self and our human self, because I don't really think it's a devil as much as it is very human. And I think so much of the time when we're doing spirituality, I see this mistake so often in people seeking spirituality, that they polarize towards the light, they polarize towards the positive end of things. And while it's beautiful to see the positive part of ourselves, and a lot of times people have not seen that, maybe they were really badly abused as a child and a parent told them that they were horrible. For them, the polarity, ironically, is to discover their beauty and their light and their joy, and that they are an okay person, they are a good person, they do have heart, and that can be a tremendous breakthrough for them. But there's sort of an addiction that happens that we're positive, because it can actually take it too far, and it can take it into we're always right. Everything that we do is correct. And this is one of those tricky spiritual places, because I don't believe there's any way to do anything incorrectly. But I do believe we make choices that have consequences, that the universe slaps our hand and says, don't do that again. You probably really need to, take a look at your choices and your actions. The way I looked at this when I was a kid was that I was raised in parochial school. I was raised in Catholic school, Catholic church, Irish Catholics on both sides, in case you can't tell by the hair and the blue eyes. And so what we would do is we'd go to Mass and we'd listen to this beautiful sermon, and he's talking about kindness and compassion, and then we would leave church and everybody was honking their horns trying to get out of the church parking lot the fastest, and they were being rude and not kind. And I realized at that point that, wow, those people really are not hearing that sermon. They didn't actually hear what he said. They're kind of going through the motions. Okay, so I'm going to go to church, and because I've gone to church, I'm a good person. And I'm like, no, it's not really that simple, that you're supposed to go listen to great truths and premises and moral constructs and values, and you're supposed to angle your behavior around that. But what can happen is that you can get into a self-righteous place very easily, because we all want to be good and we all want to think that we're right and our pathway is the right. So then we think, well, my spiritual path is better than someone else's spiritual path, and so mine is right and theirs is wrong. And so because I go to church every Sunday, I'm always right, which is of course not true. And then I can go into unconscious behaviors where my dark side actually surfaces. While it's essential to have a positive attitude in life, absolutely, especially in the attitude of gratitude, I believe that you attract particles of energy that are light. And when they cremate the gurus, at the end of it, they put a bowl over the top of the, well, They put a bowl upside down on top, and then the body on top of it, and then they cremate the body. And then when they lift the bowl, they sift through all of the little ashes, and they find these tiny little pearls. And the more enlightened the teacher was, the more little pearls they have. I like to think of this as this positive energy that they've attracted to themselves. And there's a point where if you practice the attitude of gratitude, you're actually definitely pulling those particles towards you. Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And at the same time, I think that in order to be enlightened, really enlightened, truly enlightened, you actually have to know your own dark and light sides. The people that I have met that have been the most enlightened to me were people that were very, very clear about what their weakness was, very clear about where they were holding darkness, very clear about their own childhood wounding. And they're not apologetic about it. They're very neutral about it. They're like, wow, I had this experience. This is what I learned. This is what it has given me. It's given me this drive to seek out truth and consciousness and clarity. And so they don't hide from their light, and they don't hide from their dark. They actually are doing both of those sides. I think right now in the world, it is extremely important for us to look at everyone, and I literally mean everyone, myself included, look at me this way, and look at my light side and look at my dark side. If you cannot see my dark side, then you probably shouldn't trust me in that area. So the example I would give is that many years ago there was a spiritual teacher that was in the town that I was in, and he was a gay person, which is not a problem for me at all. But he was not out to his world, his constituents, the town, his family. So he kept this hidden in the dark. And so notice, I don't think that's a bad thing at all, that part of himself, but he's hiding it. So when you hide something, it has a tendency to twist and distort. So how his twisted and distorted was that he decided that he could be the guru for telling people who to be in relationship with, which is completely absurd. So to me, if you are not clear in your own sexuality, if you are not absolutely truthfully authentic, you should not be talking to other people about what their sexual choices and actions should be. I think that that's just completely absurd. And so, that is an example of somebody who, was basically hiding their dark side and therefore twisting it and then unconsciously using it in a destructive way that did not serve everyone. So I think you can teach something when you're clear about something. You can't teach something completely authentically and honestly without that clarity of your own dark side and that balance within. So in the world right now, I know that we live in this world of duality. Everyone has two sides, positive and negative, spiritual, conscious side, negative, hidden, fear-ruled side. So one person is not better than another. We're all here in this duality to learn to come to terms with both sides of our nature. If you believe you have a positive light side, then you're in severe denial, and that part of you that hides harms people in unconscious ways that you cannot or will not see. Those that we consider enlightened are very aware of both of their sides, and they know their own dark and light sides, and so they've learned to love both of them and honor both of them for the gifts that they have to offer, which is an incredibly beautiful thing. The integration of that inherent duality is really what enlightenment is all about. That's what it actually is. If you're not enlightened, you are not enlightened if you choose to only project out into the world your positive light, your spiritual side. And it is those people in the world that right now are causing great harm. The denial of their own darkness, their own mistakes, gives that darkness permission to run amok in ways that their light side justifies with the delusions of polarized insanity. They cannot see their own darkness is controlling and manifesting pain and suffering in the world. And when the dark sides of many people come together, really terrible things happen in this world, like World War II. So people glorify war to the horror of anyone who has a consciousness that is even slightly awake. And that is because all war is an absolute atrocity. It's a failure. It's a sin against the greatest gift, which is life, that you have ever been offered. But when someone is at war with their own essential nature and in denial of it, they will unconsciously project their own inner conflict out into the world, and war and mayhem and suffering is the result. So I think if you look at the world right now, we see this everywhere. I mean, I'm not even talking about the United States. I'm like talking Venezuela, and I'm talking Russia, and I'm talking North Korea, and I'm talking, the financial challenges of Britain with Brexit. If you look out into the world, you're seeing this everywhere. And it is the part of ourselves that believes that money is the ultimate light. If you have a ton of money, then you have more light than everybody else, which is, again, so false. It's so incredibly false, because all the spiritual teachings talk about, the humble man walks first before God kind of thing. So it's sort of like money is not going to get you to God. Maybe what you do with money might get you to God, but it's really about really looking at where we have a culture that says fame is the most important thing, money is the most important thing, influence is the most important thing. And if you don't have that, you have no power. And that, of course, is also not true. We're in a time where the voices of the many need to educate the childish voices of the few. And unfortunately, there's this great book about power that was out just a little while ago. They talk about how that people in power use certain phrases, sounds, constructs to enroll the people in their ideas. And then if they basically get into power, everyone, and they literally mean everyone, eventually at some point gets puffed up with their own power. And then they basically don't do what they said that they did. And then what always happens is the people then come back in and tear down that situation, person, government, whatever. So we're in one of those places right now at the moment, and I personally am trying to prevent total chaos by getting movement to happen where there is no movement, to get consciousness to awaken by getting people to look at their own pain and suffering and where they're in denial, because where you're in denial within yourself, you cannot see in someone else, and that's just the way it goes. So we always say like attracts like. So if you have a place that your ego is puffed up, then you will be attracted to another person whose ego is puffed up. Even if you're in denial that you have an ego. Like some people say, oh no, I really don't have an ego. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you still have an ego, right? So, that there's ways to play this from multiple sides. And the game is simply to really look at just a simple truth. To me, the simple truth is that if you do anything that causes harm, and if your opinion in any way causes harm to any form of life on this planet, and I literally mean that, a tree, a fish, a dolphin, a deer, if your belief systems and your opinions are not standing with life, you're standing with death and you're standing with destruction. Now, there is a way to span both, which the Native Americans were really good at. So, if you're going to take a life like a deer, you pray and honor that life, the gift of that life. You respect that life. You don't disrespect that life. You don't torture something. You don't cause suffering. You minimize the suffering to the greatest degree because you recognize that we are in that balance between life and death. And so right now we're in this place that corporations are so busy trying to make money that they're trying to make money on the corpses of other things. And now we're to the point that it's like the corpses are our oceans. We're actually having problems with our own oceans, and the animals are dying, the whales are dying, and all of this kind of thing, which is so horrific to my brain. I can't even comprehend it, that the humanity itself is not just absolutely standing up in revolt and refusing to do certain things. So, my comment to everybody is that I know we are habituated to our comforts, and our comforts were a simple thing. The grocery store has grocery bags, so we don't have to carry grocery bags. But there's a choice. You do have a choice. I mean, you do have the choice to have your own bags and to minimize. My God, how many hundreds of bags would you use in a year if you just had your own bag? Those bags that would be gone. And then you do have the right again to choose paper over plastic, even if you forget a bag. But we get so caught up in convenience, and it's like, oh, it's the store's responsibility. Well, at this point, corporations don't care. I mean, that's a large amount of corporations. There are some corporations that do care, but a lot of corporations don't care. And so they aren't going to change unless you demand some sort of change, or your choices in your behaviors absolutely change. And so is it inconvenient for me when I go to the store, when I've got the bags in the car and I get all the way into the store and realize that I left the bags in the car? Is it inconvenient for me to go back out to my car? Yes. It's absolutely inconvenient. Is it disastrous for a turtle to get caught in a plastic bag? So my inconvenience could minimize a disaster for a turtle. If I look at it like that, it becomes really worth it. Everything on this planet was designed by the divine. It has a right to exist. We are not the only creatures on this planet. Humans do not have the right to destroy the habitats that are essential for other creatures to survive and thrive. Human greed does not give us the right to collapse entire ecosystems that benefit many for a few men out for money. I personally get so shocked because I cannot imagine the karmic consequences for being a person responsible for destroying entire ecosystems like the Amazon or Madagascar's forests for themselves, for their own lack of conscience and compassion. Basically, it's a genocide. They're basically creating karma of a genocide. And, in the Buddhist tradition, they say, you earned the right to be a human. You earned the right to be a human. And if you don't respect that right and the power that you carry, you don't get to be a human again very soon. So this is really about right now, your choices make a difference. Do you really need that extra plastic bag at the grocery store for your vegetables? I don't. You can't just, why can't you choose a paper bag over a plastic one? I know I can. I know you can. I know you're being asked to step into wakefulness and to be more present with the small things that used to seem insignificant. But that is what enlightenment is about. That is what consciousness is about, is being aware of the little small things, no matter what. And the more you are aware of the small actions that you take and how those potentially impact everyone and everything down the road, the more awake you become. And don't get me wrong, it's tiring, it's exhausting to stay fully present in everything. I remember years ago I was taking a neurolinguistics programming class, and somebody was supposed to shadow me and I was supposed to shadow them, which means I was supposed to walk behind them and look at what they looked at and move the way they moved. And then they were supposed to do the same to me. The guy was really interesting because when I shadowed him, he looked at his feet the whole time. He looked down. He wasn't even aware of the beautiful day in the sun. And I was like, oh my God, it's like he's a horse with blinders on and he can only see what's right in front of him. And he was clearly depressed and he had problems with depression, which is why he was in the NLP class, to kind of expand his mind and to give his brain some tools that would work better. Then when he shadowed me, he said, oh my God, He said, you look at everything. I mean, the bird chirps and you look at it. You're taking in everything at every moment. And I am by far from perfect. I am not perfect in any way, but I'm fascinated by things. And the places that I get upset with myself are when I don't pay attention to something subtle, something small. And then I hurt something because of my unconsciousness. Um, so as an example, I mean, many years ago, we have a barn and we have a far barn, so it's further away from the house, and we store a lot of things in there. And I went out to the far barn, and a skunk had fallen into a big plastic um, container kind of thing, and it died. It couldn't get out. And I thought, wow, I was so upset with myself. Like, how did I not feel the skunk? How did I not notice the skunk? And I believed that it was like, okay, well, the skunk is really far away, right? The skunk is really far away. So I didn't feel it because of that. But could I have had a consciousness that would have noticed something was amiss at the far barn? And the answer is yes. I do have that capacity. It would have to be practiced. I'm not saying I could do it overnight, but it was that realization that I had a consciousness that had a certain size of a bubble, and maybe I needed to expand my bubble, and I started to need to notice maybe things that were happening on the land that were further out and much more out there. So, so then many years later, I had a funny feeling. I did have a funny feeling. And I went out, not to the far barn, but to the first barn. And sure enough, there was a skunk in one of those things again. And I was like, God, I need to turn all these things over. And so here's this little black and white face peering up at me, like, get me out of here. And so I just leaned it over and stepped back, and the skunk ran out. And since then, that skunk has stayed right around, and it has a tendency to feed on the sunflower seed residue from my bird feeders. But this skunk does not have any smell because it doesn't feel threatened by me. And so my actions potentially changed the reactiveness and the behavior of that skunk towards humans. And so I sit there and tell him how pretty he is and how cute he is. And, just I'm positive towards him. So again, I think we can expand our reality beyond our known conscious self. And I want you to start looking at the things that you think are insignificant, because they are not insignificant. Things that you're using every single day are ending up in oceans, or they're like garbage. They're ending up in the oceans. This is not okay. It's completely not okay. So we have to find another way to do this. We can't, without all of humanity changing its behavior, this world is in dire peril. I'm just going to say it. You cannot wait for our ineffective governments to make laws that serve the greater good, because they are clearly not going to do that quickly. They have shown that they are deeply entrenched in bribery, and they're bought by big corporations that have no interest in doing good for the world at the moment. They've shown that they are defending horrible trends that harm the world, and this will eventually harm humanity. I mean, so we can't wait any longer. We can't wait for them. You can do small things every day to change your habits and behaviors that unconsciously harm plants and animals of the world. You can stop buying things a certain way. And if you do that, the greedy corporations will be forced to change, because it's really up to us. You cannot count on those governments having a conscience and doing the right thing until all of those that lie and intentionally deceive are shifted out of positions of power or are awakened. And that's going to take a bit. So that's what I wanted to share today. Thank you guys for listening. I hope this was interesting to you. Okay,